Hi, welcome back to another great video. If you are a new viewer, make sure you subscribe and like. We are, I guess, 3 people shy away from our first 10 subscribers. So yeah, make sure you hit all the different buttons on the screen. So today we are going to look into what exactly is the importance of input encoding in web apps, right? What problem does it exactly solve? What are the reasons we need to explicitly do input encoding in our web apps, and how does it secure you against all different types of attacks, right? To get started, if you remember, we are doing a secure coding playlist, and for that we are referencing the OWASP secure coding practices checklist, right? So this is a checklist that includes all different secure coding practices that you should ensure before moving your product to production, correct? So we are just going through one by one and trying to understand why would they recommend something specifically. So today we are looking at this 6 point encode input to a common character set before validating. You can see the same in my Medium article as well, which I will be linking in the description below. Cool. So what it mentions is encode input to a common character set before validating, right? But the question is why though? Okay. So let me tell you the problem. So assume that you have an input box on your website. You have an input box and that input box accepts some input, right? Now this input you put inside a variable called value, right? So you can see here, there's an input box, you're fetching its value and putting it inside this variable. Okay. Now you are creating a SQL query based on that variable. So you are basically simply just injecting it into an existing query structure you have. So for example, select your variable from my table. So we are expecting a column name in the particular from the input field, right? From the input box, I'm expecting a column name. So ideally, what we would want is somebody would write something like column_1, which would return the records from that column and print on the screen. Sounds good enough. Everything should work fine. Now, what if somebody inserts colon delete inside the input box? So what will happen? It will change the text to basically select statement ends there and then delete from my table, right? So that means the select statement ends here and it will be ignored, and delete from my table would delete the whole all the records in this particular table, which is a very destructive action, and we would not want that to happen, right? So how does one protect against it, right? So basically this exact example is called an SQL injection attack, and to protect yourself against an SQL injection attack, you should either do some kind of conversion or transformation of input in a safe format, or you should put validations in your input box. Now I personally always, if I have to choose between the two, certainly do both of them if you can, right? Put some validations on input box and then transform the data into a safe format. But if you have to choose between the two of them, I would choose the input transformation part, because that method makes sure that your data is not misinterpreted. Whatever input is shared through the input box is not misinterpreted, right? For example, in this case, if I had converted the particular delete text into something that is type safe, right? That is not directly an SQL query. So that way, none of these destructive actions would have happened. Cool. So let me just show you a little bit more with more examples so that you get it clearly. So the input transformation that I'm talking about, the transformation of input to a predefined format, and basically a format that makes sure that none of the special symbols or special characters are misinterpreted, is called input encoding. Now, one of the most popular encoding technique you might have heard about is UTF. Some of you might have already seen a lot of documents with UTF 5.8 written on them, right? So this one is the most popular encoding technique. So what it basically does is it basically adds an escape character right before any special character that is found in the string. Now let me tell you an example. Many times in front-end projects, we are programmatically generating URLs, especially when we are doing routing, right? And it might be very much dependent on what input a user puts in many cases, right? But what if a user inserts a question mark in the input, right? And we append that input field directly to our URL. Then that question mark will be interpreted as the beginning of a path variable, right? Beginning of query parameters, which will then be fetched on the next screen, and will there is a big possibility that these things might change how a website is getting rendered, what type of information is being fetched, and it also opens door for different malicious attacks, as it turns the whole behavior into an abnormality, right? Now, what will happen if you use UTF-8? So if you use UTF-8 encoding, it will convert the question mark that comes as input into a particular UTF code. So this is the UTF code for question mark ampersand hash 63 colon, right? So this would be inserted in the path URL whenever the question mark is coming from input, making sure that it won't be misinterpreted as the beginning of path variables. Cool. So that's the logic for using the input encoding in your particular program. You might also come across a term called canonicalization. It basically refers to making sure your whole application communicates in one single format. So basically, it's a concept of implementing input encoding, but restricting to one single format that you have decided for the whole application, right? So yeah, such as using UTF-8 to safeguard yourself against injection and other types of attack. All right. So that was it for today. See you in the next one. Make sure to like, subscribe to my newsletter to get any updates as soon as possible when I post something. And see you in the next one.